You grow up seeing ads for the people that like make windows for houses, and it's all about like it's like out
Will you zoom out a little so we can see Good morning. Welcome to Saturday of Thompson Room 2024, bigger on the inside. Welcome our first panelist of the day, Christopher Jones.
Hello. Hello. No, please sit. Please. No. No, it's okay. Sit down. Did that fool the people watching online? Hi. For anyone who doesn't know who I am, my name is Christopher Jones. I am from Minnesota originally. I now live out in Los Angeles. I do storyboard work for Warner Brothers Animation. But I spent many years as a comic book artist. And I've been lucky enough over the years to do a number of prints and covers and comic book stories for Doctor Who. And the purpose of this panel is to kind of cover a little bit of that history. It's a little bit show and tell. It's a little bit window into my process. It's a little bit sharing some anecdotes and Easter eggs. So hopefully I can get through this with enough time that if we have any questions, we can take some of those. But I've got a visual presentation here since I thought that was probably going to be more helpful when talking about artwork. So why don't we just get started with that. My first exposure to Doctor Who actually came in the form of Doctor Who comics. I'd heard of the show, but before it was ever airing locally here that I had a chance to watch it. Marvel Comics did a 4-issue stretch of their Marvel premiere book in which they reprinted stories that had originally appeared in black and white in Doctor Who magazine in the UK. And this, as you can see, was the 4th Doctor era. And these 2 issues out of the 4 were the 2 I managed to get. This was in the era before I had access to like a proper comic book store. So very much I wouldn't get complete runs of things. I would get what happened to be at the grocery store or wherever I managed to find my comics. So these were the 2 I managed to get. And I really enjoyed them right away, although certainly reading the 4th Doctor on the comic book page doesn't capture the bizarre, wonderful charisma of Tom Baker. But just from this, I was already hooked. When they did start showing Doctor Who on television locally, they did start with the beginning of the Tom Baker run, showing one serialized episode a day, Monday through Friday. And I somehow managed to perfectly miss all 4 episodes of his first story, Robot. So the first Doctor Who I actually saw was Ark in Space, which is not only still a favorite episode of mine, but not a bad episode to start on. The Doctor and his companions land on what appears to be an abandoned space station and have an episode worth of troubles with just automated security systems and the like before meeting monsters and having other adventures ensue. It's great stuff. So I was already a big Doctor Who fan and was trying to get to Doctor Who conventions when I could, which even before I had done Doctor Who, I had started doing Doctor Who prints just because I draw and I like Doctor Who, so I had started just doing kind of little portrait shots of doctors. I had just sort of started on doing those and wasn't in a big hurry to work my way through the series. And then, I mean, this is obviously much, much later than my childhood watching of Tom Baker. At this point, the series had come back in 2005. I had enjoyed Christopher Eccleston and David Tennant. And when Matt Smith was first coming in, and I first got my hands on the toy of Matt Smith's sonic screwdriver, a joke popped into my head that I decided to make a print out of. So long before the 50th anniversary special made the exact same joke, I had done this print, which I don't think anyone from the show saw the print and stole the idea. I just think it's the obvious joke to make when you put those two doctors together. I had done silly things like this, which I just thought having Bill and Ted meet the Daleks was funny. I had done some Doctor Who prints that I just thought were pretty, like this one. I like just the sense of it being very vast and empty. This is very dark. I would not have gone this dark as a print if I'd originally intended this as a print. I originally intended it as wallpaper for the computer background. But every attempt I made at doing a slightly brighter version of it as a print, it just sort of lost the sense of mystery that all that darkness had. So I was doing things like this print featuring all the Masters. It was done when John Sim had appeared as the Master on Doctor Who. This features all the Masters from television up until that point. Derek Jacobi is prominently featured because I did this when the Gallifrey 1 convention out in Los Angeles, where I did not yet live, I had heard that they were going to be having Derek Jacobi coming as a guest, and as it turns out, he had to cancel that year. And they just recently announced that he's coming this year. So now, more than a decade after I did this print, I'll hopefully have a chance to give him a copy of it. See, I had done this print, which featured Ian and Barbara finding the TARDIS at Totter's Lane. A friend of mine was collecting sketches in her sketchbook of various superheroes with the TARDIS, and given that I'm a lifelong Batman fan, I did a rough sketch version of this idea, and she liked it so much, and everyone that saw it liked it so much, I decided to do a print out of it, so I did a nicer color version of the illustration. After the five-ish Doctors reboot came out, I did this piece, which amused me. Sylvester is wearing his Hobbit t-shirt under his coat in that shot. And I had done this piece with the First Doctor and Susan taking a last look at Gallifrey before leaving on their travels. So these were all prints I had done before I'd ever had any official Doctor Who credits to my name. It was just stuff I was doing for my own benefit so that I had prints with Doctor Who stuff on them when I went to conventions, which I was going to on the merits of my career drawing comic books. And then I was set up at the Chicago TARDIS convention. And this is not a photo from Chicago TARDIS, but it gives you an idea of what my table setup looks like when I'm set up for the weekend, as opposed to going in and out for an hour-long signing like I do here. And I was putting up prints so that, as you approached my table, you could see the different things I had. And one of the prints that I had displayed, you can see it in this photo, but a clearer version of it is here. I thought it would be fun, since Bessie had appeared in the Seventh Doctor story, to have the Seventh Doctor and Ace in Bessie. And the whole concept for this print just sort of grew out of control. I thought, oh, it'd be fun to have them in Bessie. Oh, it'd be fun to have them like in a chase scene or some kind of a battle. Oh, it'd be great. I could have Ace in the back lobbying Nitro 9. That'd be cool. Well, who are they fighting? Well, my favorite Sylvester McCoy era story is Remembrance of the Daleks, so let's have them fighting Daleks. Well, then I should have them fighting all the Daleks that you see in that story. So I've got two factions of Daleks, and I've got the special weapons Dalek, and I've got Dalek spaceships and this Dalek shuttle, and we got, oh my God, it got out of control. But it was a big epic print. And the title of it, I borrowed from the last line spoken in the last episode of the classic series. Come on, Ace, we've got work to do. So I was set up at the Chicago TARDIS convention. I had that print up by my table. I'm setting up, and a gentleman starts setting up at the table next to me. And I didn't recognize him by sight, and he didn't have any of his stuff out yet or a sign out yet saying what his name was, so I didn't know who it was. But he started looking at my prints, and he looked very closely at that one, and he saw the title, and he said, "Oh, I wrote that line." And that's when I realized it was Andrew Cartmel. Like, oh, I'm sitting next to Andrew Cartmel this weekend. Okay, once again, how the heck did I get in this room? But we were chatty all weekend, helped in part by the fact that he wasn't set up to be taking credit cards, so I was running his credit card transactions for him, and just we were making the money right at the end of the weekend. But we were chatting all weekend, and he, by the end of the weekend, he said, I am preparing to do a Seventh Doctor miniseries right now for Titan Comics. Would you be interested in drawing a Doctor Who comic? And I was like, absolutely, yes, I would. So he was kind enough to introduce me to the editors at Titan Comics, who at the time had the Doctor Who license. Now, as it turned out, his miniseries was in development for quite a while. I don't know if the issue was his writing schedule. I don't know if a lot of revisions were required. I don't know if it was a lengthy approval process from the BBC. All of those things are possible. All I know is he had made that introduction for me to Titan Comics. There was initially some talk of maybe I would do a cover or two for them while waiting for there to be a comic book proper for me to draw. And then one day, I got an email from the editor there who asked me, would I be interested in drawing a miniseries with the Third Doctor? I'm like, sure. And he said, I can't tell you who the writer is because we haven't announced it yet. And when we announce it, it's going to be kind of a big thing that we have him writing a Doctor Who comic for us. And I was like, okay. And I was asked if I could do some sample art to be approved by Titan and by the BBC as an artist for this comic book project. I'm like, sure. So I did a drawing of the Third Doctor, and I think I got better at his likeness later. This was my first attempt, but thankfully it was good enough for tryout purposes. They liked this okay, and I had time to pencil one page because I was in the middle of another comic at the time and was dealing with the deadlines for that. And this was like all extra work being done pro bono as a tryout. So I penciled this page. You can see my pencils on the left, and someone else applied inks and color to it on the right. And the version on the right actually got used in a couple of the online press release announcement type things they did when they announced the book. But in any case, they informed me that I had been approved to draw the comic, which was great news. And we worked out the page rate and had an idea of the schedule and all that. And I emailed the editor. I said, you do realize you still haven't told me who's writing this thing, correct? And before I heard back from the editor, I got an email from my friend who I had known from seeing him at other conventions already, Paul Cornell. And the email from Paul said this: "Hi, Jehoshaphat, reverse the polarity of the neutron flow." I'm like, I think I know who's writing this comic. And so, Paul Cornell and I already knew each other, had discussed that it would be fun to work together sometime. And Titan Comics had no idea that we knew each other at all. I was hired as the artist without knowing that he was the writer, and he came on as writer without knowing who they were approaching to draw the book. And so it was a happy surprise for both of us that we were getting to do a Doctor Who comic together. That comic was Heralds of Destruction, featuring the Third Doctor. It was a 5-part miniseries. To give you a little more of a sense of process, on the left is my pencil art. On the right are inks. These inks are by me. So you can see that the pencils are pretty well detailed. There's a separate stage for inking. It's really part of the look of traditional comic book art. It goes back to the days when printing for comics was not nearly as sophisticated as it is now. You needed to have really high contrast line art for it to print well. These days you could do it all in all kinds of subtle gradated tones and it would be fine, but there's a tradition of comic book line art looking a certain way now. So there you can see it being tightened up and obviously much easier to see the detail in the higher contrast inked artwork. And then this is what that looks like with the lettering and color applied, having been done by somebody other than myself. Part of the reason why the penciling, inking, lettering, and coloring sometimes gets divided between 4 different creators when doing a comic is both so that the publisher can have more editorial control, because there's an editorial check going from each stage to the next in that process, but also for the sake of speed. It takes a long time to produce 10 or 20 to 22 pages of a comic, and if you're doing that on a monthly schedule, the more of those steps any one person is doing, the longer it takes. So I can just barely manage to pencil and ink 20 pages a month. If I was trying to do coloring or lettering in addition to that, I could not do a comic a month. This is what the script from Paul looked like. You can see here it starts by saying the doctor's taken an overly complicated, lots of bells and whistles version of a pager from his pocket. He's raising an eyebrow at his display. One of the gentlemen has leaned in to look at it. So it's giving you a description of what the characters are doing. At the top of a scene, the script will explain where it is. But it's totally up to the artist to decide how that page is composed visually. I'm having to worry about things like if you see multiple characters speaking, like in that top panel there's 5 separate bits of dialogue from different characters, and it helps a lot if that dialogue can appear left to right, up to down, as far as the order that you read it, so that you're planning for that with the visuals. All these things that are of consideration to the artist that the reader usually does not think about. And basically, so it goes through page by page with that kind of description, and so then it's my job to, again, pencil the artwork, and even though I'm not putting the dialogue in, I have a plan for where it's going to go. So you see there's like space left above people's heads or to the side of characters, so that, as you can see on the right, there's places for all those dialogue balloons to go, and you're just covering up bits of background that aren't very important. Yes, there is a little drawing under there that's getting covered up, but it's not somebody's face or not a key element of the background art that's important for understanding where you are, or any other pertinent information about the scene. Now, one of the things about working on a book like this, I've done comics that are based on animation properties. I've done straight up superhero comics, and I've done things like this that are based on a television or film property. And when you are working on something where you're trying to get the likenesses of actors, it's very hard to draw photo accurate likenesses of real people and then have other characters appear, and if you're just inventing them out of your head, having them look convincing in the same way as the drawings of the real people. So you tend to cast, at least I do, how I work, I tend to cast the other characters with actors, even if I'm not worried about being so spot on with the likeness that the reader recognizes them. It at least gives me a starting point. So one of the gentlemen, if you see the gentleman in the upper left of the page in that first panel, he was based on Patrick McNee from the Avengers, because I figured he would be at this gentleman's club. Oh, somebody in the room will know this name. I'm blanking on it right now. From the Hellfire Club episode of the Avengers. I'm blanking his name, but you can see the actor there that I based that character on. This gentleman, who the Doctor's playing chess with, is based on a British character actor named C. Aubrey Smith, who people of my age might know as the basis for an American cartoon character, Commander McBragg, who is part of the old Rocky and Bullwinkle show. Although it turns out that character who was playing chess with the Doctor, that wasn't his real face anyway. It was really, of course, the Master. And I've got to say, nothing made me geek out more over the reality that I was getting to draw a Doctor Who comic than when I was inking Roger Delgado's beard and doing those little white stripes at the corners. Of all the stuff I drew, for some reason, like that little detail always tickled me. So one of the things I really loved about working on this comic was that the first issue really felt like it could have been a lost episode from the Pertwee era. You have an incursion by a handful of aliens in a small town in rural England, and Unit shows up, and it feels like something they would have done in the show. Now, I show these pages, though, to point out a couple points in the story where the Doctor is being strangled a bit by this alien contraption. And we were lucky enough to get very positive reviews on this comic, story and art. But I did see one review that was criticizing that they thought there were times I made the Doctor's face look a little goofy. And I was like, have you seen the show? I mean, seriously, have you seen the show? One of the characters we had in this story, one of the people with Unit, was the return of a Unit soldier named Osgood, who it has been suggested is related to the modern series Osgood. And to tie those together, Paul, in his script, had the earlier Osgood pull out an inhaler to use it in this one panel. One of the most surreal things that came out of drawing this story was that this small village where this alien incursion took place was a village called Fairford. And here's the Doctor driving into Fairford in Bessie. And Unit has set up a temporary headquarters in a church in Fairford, and the script described it as being St. Mary's Church. And I am not an expert by any means in Old English churches, and I don't know if there's anything about naming conventions that would necessarily tie, if it's named this, it would be of a certain era, and it would be likely to have this kind of architecture. So in trying to find a reference for this, I just did a Google search for English churches named St. Mary's, hoping that would be good enough. And I found one, and I used that as reference for this church. And what I didn't know is that, well, yes, I did know that Paul Cornell's wife is a vicar. I didn't know that he named his church for his wife's church, and the one I had found in my Google search was the same church. So it was a little surreal for me when I got to visit a location from my comic book a few years later. And it was very weird. It's one thing to draw what you know is a real location, that you know what it is, and then you get to go there. But when, you think you're just pulling generic visual reference for something invented for a comic book, and then you get to go there, that was very strange. So again, so much fun stuff to work on in this story. After they deal with this initial incursion in this small village, the Doctor and Joe are returning to Unit headquarters, and you can see the shot of them driving onto the grounds of Unit headquarters down at the bottom of the left-hand page there. And if you ask yourself, now Chris, you're not the kind of obsessed with detail person that would actually find what the shooting location was for unit headquarters from the John Pertwee era of Doctor Who to find photo reference of new angles to use for your comic. Yes, I absolutely did that. But in any case, they're driving back to unit headquarters, and this is where if you haven't read the book yet, I'm about to spoil things for you, and I apologize. I do have copies of it available at my signings, one of which immediately follows this panel, but I'm going to spoil things for you now, so be warned. They arrive back and discover the second Doctor having taken over the lab, and he's partially pulling the TARDIS apart and going through its guts and generally making a mess, and the third Doctor isn't completely thrilled about it. It's been made clear that this is about 2 weeks after the events of the three Doctors, so Joe has met the second Doctor before. It's not completely shocking to have the second Doctor show up, but the vibe is kind of like, oh no, what are you doing here again? And as the script requested to have guts pulled out of the TARDIS, is like, well, if the whole console isn't coming out like they did in some Pertwee era stories, I wasn't sure what I could portray as guts pulled out of the TARDIS that would be recognizable other than just having like cables and stuff coming out. Although I did manage to work, back. On the right, you see I think that's a magnetic clamp that was used at one point in the series. I had that sitting out, but working in little Easter eggs and references when I can. Another fun sequence in the story is at one point, because this alien parasite is trying to take over Joe's mind, the Doctor uses hypnosis to himself enter Joe's mind, which was treated as this very like 60s psychedelic kind of thing, and really playing up the kind of 60s flower child, I guess 70s flower child side of Joe's personality. So you get inside of her mind and it's all like, whoa, it's gotten weird. But this was very fun for me to draw. And then, let's see, we have the second Doctor going to deliver something to some shady corporate people, and he's pulling more stuff out. One of the things you can see on the table there on the right-hand page is all kinds of bits and bobs. And I was that magnetic clamp makes another appearance. I was in a really weird mood, so for some reason I threw Red Dwarf in miniature on there. It's like, yeah, it's British sci-fi. What the heck? Let's see if anyone recognizes it. No one had. But let's see. Oh, I think I may have put these in. Yeah, that didn't need to be there. So, spoiler warning. What the reason that the second Doctor went off and was delivering all this stuff to these shady people is we reveal that it has actually not been the second Doctor. No, this was not a multi-Doctor story. This was actually Salamander from Enemy of the World, who has somehow escaped his fate in the time vortex, where he had fallen at the end of his original second Doctor era story, and has now made his way to Earth. And first of all, I got to draw him falling through the time vortex, which was great. And of course, I made the time vortex look like the opening titles of the Pertwee era of the TV show, because I always thought that they seemed to use those opening titles as they doubled as VFX footage for the time vortex, so we went with that. I was also amused that Paul's script requested that we see some creatures that live in the time vortex as we see Salamander falling through it. And I went and researched. It's like, well, Paul, as far as I could tell, there have only ever been 3 creatures they've determined live in the time vortex, and you wrote one of them. So we have a Vortizor, which is from the Big Finish audios. I think that was introduced in the first 8th Doctor Big Finish release. We have the Time Monster from the Pertwee era, a Chronivore, I think it was also alternately called. And then the Reapers from Father's Day, Paul Cornell's Christopher Eccleston episode. And the idea was that Salamander had followed the TARDIS through the time vortex as he had fallen out of it, and the next place the TARDIS landed after the story with Enemy of the World was in 1960s London for the story Web of Fear. So Salamander materializes on the street in 1960s London with headlines at the newsstand from Web of Fear, and he uses the advanced technology that he has from the environment he came from originally to basically start building a little secret empire in 1960s London. We have him at a lab here with two assistants, and again, I'm casting characters here. And two friends of mine that I knew were huge Doctor Who fans. They're performers here locally, one of whom has now moved to Los Angeles. He did that before I did. Joseph and Joshua Scrimshaw. And I modeled these two assistants on the Scrimshaw brothers. Why the colorist decided to make one of them very, very tanning bed orange, I don't know, but that wasn't my doing. But yeah, you can see them here next to their real life counterparts. One of the very surreal things for me is right before we had the reveal that the second Doctor was really Salamander, I had been sworn to secrecy by Paul. You don't tell anybody about this twist. This is the best twist. We're keeping it a total secret. And then I went to Chicago TARDIS, and it was literally, the convention was that weekend. The issue that revealed the Salamander twist was the following Wednesday when comics came out. And randomly, these two young cosplayers show up at my table. And I couldn't tell them why I thought their costumes were so funny. I've actually gotten to be friends with them, and we now think it's a hilarious anecdote, but at the time it was very frustrating to me. I was like, you really want to see the next issue of this comic, but I can't tell you why. Again, going back to Joseph Scrimshaw here, when I used the two characters, I knew one of them survived longer in the story and the other one got killed right away, but they had the privilege of being killed by tissue compression eliminator. And I am delighted to say that to this day, if you go to the Doctor Who wiki, the way they illustrate the effects of the tissue compression eliminator is by shrinking Joseph Scrimshaw from my comic book. So that entertains me greatly. The other thing I loved about this miniseries is, like I said, it started from a place that it could have been a lost episode of the show. And then the scale of the action builds over the 5 issues until you get to issue 5, and it has gone to crazy town. You've got Salamander riding this cybernetic sea serpent thing before trying to take over 1800s Parliament. And wearing like weird alien battle armor. It's like, yeah, they might have attempted this on the show, but it would have looked really bad. But we got to do the big budget version of it because it was a comic book. They could not have done that effectively in a comic book. I'm sorry, in a TV episode. That's the wonderful thing about comic books. If you can draw it, you have the budget to do it. I do have to say, in addition to casting other people from just like photographs, I repurposed to use their face. My friend Sean helped me by posing to help me work out some physical poses I was finding challenging. Like there was a shot of the Brigadier who had been tied up by the Master and left in a cupboard in a rather awkward position. My friend Sean was good enough to help me work out the pose for that and several other things. Although in most of the shots, like this one, you'd never know it was him because I swapped out a completely different face for his. I was assigned as the artist for this miniseries rather late in the game, so they already had all the cover art assigned to other artists by the time I came on. Certainly for the early issues, then the later issues, I was too busy getting pages drawn to take the time to do a cover. So I ended up not getting to do any covers for this miniseries, which is why as soon as I got done, the first thing I did was do a third Doctor print just to get it out of my system that I wanted to do a big splashy third Doctor image. So that happened. So then I did a few more prints in between comics projects. No good can come of this. That's not going to end well for anybody, but it's amusing to think about. I did the 3 First Doctors. As a gift for a friend of mine who's a big Doctor Who fan, I did matched portraits of the 5th Doctor and Anthony Ainley's Master. And then about a year and a half after I did the 3rd Doctor miniseries, finally, Andrew Cartmell's 7th Doctor miniseries was ready to go. So I got to do that. It was originally going to be a 4-issue miniseries. And then after we had started work on it, we learned through the solicitation that came out, the thing that tells retailers and fans what the publisher has coming in the upcoming months, without any advance notice, we, the creative team, found out they were condensing the 4-issue miniseries down to 3 issues by having the first issue be double length. And the problem with that is it means that you now need issue 3 to be done when issue 2 was originally going to be done, and issue 4 to be done when issue 3 was originally going to be done. So they basically stole a month of our schedule without telling us they were doing it, which was the cause of some frustration at the time. But the image on the left is the cover for the first issue that I did, and then these were the covers for issues. I have them out of order here, 3 and 2. The one with the umbrella hanging out of the TARDIS is probably my personal favorite of the 3. But the fun thing about the one on the left is it's the Doctor and Ace with every monster they faced during their run of television episodes together. And the one thing that's different about this is the print version of that image versus the comic book cover. When I did the initial sketch for approval of the comic book cover, I was told, yes, we occasionally use the Daleks, but since they're not featured in this story, we would rather not have to pay the licensing fee for the Daleks to include them on a cover for a story where they're not needed. So could you take the Daleks off of it? So the comic book cover does not have Daleks at the top, but for the print, I put them back on. So these are pages from the 7th Doctor miniseries. I really love Sylvester's Doctor. I really enjoy that era of the show. If I have one criticism of that era, is to me it's an era where you can occasionally really feel the constraints of the tight budget. There are stories that I think this is fun, but it would have been so amazing if they'd had a little more money for either special effects or location shooting or more extras or whatever it was. So as I was drawing this story, part of my one of my driving wishes is to really make it as grand in scale as I could. So we're in the Australian outback, and I tried to make that feel very vast. We have near future NASA astronauts encountering an alien spaceship, and I really enjoyed trying to contrast the look of very NASA-looking technology with something very alien-looking. The alien ships were not only all very insectoid, but had this sort of pattern on them that I don't know if anyone ever noticed, that the pattern was different from panel to panel. I mean, you wouldn't know from these pages, but over the course of the series, I had the pattern always changing, imagining that it was moving. Sometimes you have ideas in your head that aren't necessarily going to come across well in a comic, but you do it anyway because you have ideas in your head. Anyway, this story featured the return of the Countermeasures team, seen in Remembrance of the Daleks. We first meet Group Captain Gilmore, mysteriously found in the middle of this alien spaceship, having been there so long his hair has grown out. The other 2 members of the team we find on an archaeological expedition. There, I can say it. This is Group Captain Gilmore looking a little more like his normal self. They rendezvous with the Doctor at this library, and I could not find any way of getting this library across without putting in a ridiculous amount of detail, and this took forever, and oh my God, seriously. But you do what you have to do. Again, trying to give things a sense of scale and scope and make it feel a little more lavish. We find a crashed alien ship in the Australian outback, which is starting to tie some threads from the story together. The aliens have set up a headquarters hidden inside of a volcano, hence both the title of the miniseries, Operation Volcano, and my ambition to make it feel like a Bond film. Oh gosh, we have clear anti-radiation suits that I had to figure out how to make it look like they were wearing some sort of weird alien anti-radiation suit, but still have the characters inside be recognizable. So they're just these weird kind of baggy clear overlay suits. We have the doctor gassing a bunch of people. The original script showed the doctor prepping his umbrella in the scene on the left, setting up the idea that he had loaded a knockout gas into it. I don't know why he's becoming the Penguin at this point, but he in the script he just knocks out one of the bad guys. I'm like, no, he spins and knocks out like a half dozen bad guys because the doctor needs to have cool moments. When I first found out I was going to get to draw this miniseries, I was very careful to ask, when is this story set? Is it after the TV episodes? And the reason I cared about that was, famously, they were looking to do to build a new TARDIS interior set in season 27 before they canceled it and did not do a season 27. And I was asking, could we do a season 27 console room? I think it would be really cool. I think fans would enjoy it. I think I would really enjoy designing and drawing it. And Andrew Cartmel knew all of that, and we'd gotten approval to do it. And then we don't see the interior of the TARDIS until the last page and a half of the story. So I'd spent all this time designing this, and we hardly got to see it. After we did this whole 4-issue miniseries, which was condensed down to 3 issues, the editor wrote a 5-page tease that came out before it all as part of Titan's Free Comic Book Day release that year, and had a scene in the TARDIS in that, just so we would get more use out of it. And that came out first, and it got colored very gold. And I said that, it shouldn't be that gold. It should be like white and gray like the TARDIS, but it's just mood lighting. And I tried to explain elaborately how I wanted all the lighting to work, and I couldn't really get it across. So I finally, just in time for this convention, and this is a print I do have here this weekend, did this print. And the little Easter egg in this that I'm very happy with is we've got Ace in the foreground here in this little reading nook, and the book she's reading is The Time Machine. The 2 books on the table next to her are Pygmalion and The Anarchist's Cookbook, which just felt appropriate for Ace. So after this miniseries, more prints that I did just for fun. Titan has a wonderful policy. I'm so grateful to them. Unlike comics I've done for DC and other publishers, when I've done a cover for Titan Comics, after the comic has come out, they have no problem with me offering it as a print. And I had been commissioned for some covers for Titan that never got used. They, at one point, drastically cut back on the number of Doctor Who books they were doing. There was a while there that they were doing a separate ongoing series for every one of the modern Doctors. And at some point they realized that was not a sustainable model, and they cut back. But it means that I had done covers for 11th and 10th Doctor comics that were never getting used, so I have them as a print now, but they never appeared as a comic book cover. This was some promotional art I had originally been asked to do for the Gallifrey 1 convention, and now offer it as a print. On the left here is a print I did of the 13th Doctor that I did as soon as we had seen her costume, but we hadn't seen any of her episodes yet. and I really enjoyed the idea of playing off the rainbow design on her shirt and do kind of a prism thing with it, and the clock background and with 13 and the whole thing. And then shortly after I completed this, Titan asked if I would do a 13th Doctor cover, and had nothing to give me as far as companions, villains, just something with the 13th Doctor. I'm like, well, if you had asked me 2 months ago, I would have just done this, what I did for a print, but I've done that already. So as I sometimes say when I don't have any other more narrative ideas, graphic design to the rescue. So I went with this sort of monotone overall design, with the exception being the sky and more of the rainbow pattern from her shirt. So that was my first 13th Doctor cover. I also did this one, which saw print, and this one, which again commissioned, and then they just never found a place to use it. I was commissioned to do a cover for a story they did that featured the 8th Doctor, that they wanted Bad Wolf in various forms written all over the TARDIS. This rather epic thing from the story they did that had the 13th Doctor meeting the 10th Doctor, because you just can't stop David Tennant's Doctor from coming back. And this actually was a cover that what's triptych but for 4 and not 3. Well, in any case, this was divided. This was originally the covers for a series of 4 issues of a miniseries. So, it had to be designed that you had major characters featured on each of the 4 covers. And I've not made a print out of this because with the size of it and the shape, I'm like, I don't know what to do with that. If I do it on 11 by 17, it's going to be very small and have a lot of wasted space at the top and the bottom. And if I do it larger than that, I don't know how I will ship it or carry it with me to conventions. And I have the same problem with this one. They asked for a Christmas cover that was divided in 2. It was not a issue 1 and issue 2. It was 2 variant covers of the same story. And they basically just told me, like, it's the 13th Doctor, and it's a Christmas story, and the Krampus is the villain, and there are toy soldiers. Go. Okay. So the most recent comic book I've gotten to do is Dan Slott, who is a writer most known for his work at Marvel Comics. He has written more Spider-Man comics than any other writer, which is a staggering thing to say. Huge Doctor Who fan, has wanted to do Doctor Who for years. And the problem is he's been under exclusive contract with Marvel. And every time he was negotiating an extension of that contract, he would try to get an exception put in that would allow him to go write something Doctor Who. And the most recent time he was re-upping his exclusive with Marvel, they finally gave in and said, yes, you can do 3 Doctor Who comics over 3 years. And he said, great. And he went to Titan Comics, and they said, they're letting me do 3 Doctor Who comics, but they haven't said how long the comics can be, so let's do 3 graphic novels. And so the first one that came out, it was originally going to come out a year ago, and then they found out that the 10th Doctor was going to be, who is the lead in the main story of this graphic novel, was going to be featured in the 60th anniversary, and so they understandably thought, well, let's release this closer to the 60th anniversary and kind of piggyback on all that media hype. So it did not come out until late last year. Probably the most fun thing for me, though, to draw in the whole story was this spread of a speech that the Doctor apparently gives to all of his companions, and you're getting it in snippets, starting with Hartnell delivering the speech directly to camera, but then seeing it continue with each Doctor in succession giving it to a companion of their era in a console room of their era. the bit of design I was happy with that worked out on this is Dan specified that he wanted the Hartnell panel to be the full vertical of the page and the left half of the first page, and then the rest of the spread was a 9-panel grid that ran across onto the second page. And I realized that what that did is it put the 5th, 6th, and 7th Doctor in a row, and they all have pretty much the same console room set. So I made a triptych out of it where it's a continuous image, which I thought just did just enough to tie it together to feel less like just a visual jumble. But it was very fun to do, and I took forever getting all the detail right on those consoles because I knew if I got one switch wrong, I'd hear about it. Because I know how Doctor Who fans are, because I'm one of them. I think I put this on here out of order, but the next slide, let me preface it by saying I had done that slide with all the masters, and then Missy came out, and people would see that print and be like, well, where's Missy? And I would tell them, she didn't exist when I drew this. And they said, well, you should add her. I'm like, I'm not going to just stick her face on. I'll do a Missy print at some point. But I couldn't think what I wanted to do for a print. I like to have an interesting bit of graphic design or something narrative, and I hadn't come up with anything. And finally, it was her last episode that gave me the inspiration. So if you remember in the story with the giant ship at the edge of the black hole where time is running differently throughout the ship, at the end of the story, John Sims' master is in the elevator car heading down to where his TARDIS was left. He's been mortally wounded. So here's the elevator car arriving on the floor where he said the TARDIS had been left, with Missy emerging, having freshly regenerated, still wearing the John Sim Master's costume. So I was happy with how that finally came out, but boy, it took a long time to get around to it. So this is the cover from the Dan Slott Doctor Who comic, where I got to draw all the monsters that I didn't get to draw inside. I was originally going to draw the whole story, and then the demands on Dan's schedule from Marvel meant that his Doctor Who script wasn't ready when we'd expected it to be, and my window of opportunity between animation jobs to crank out a 48-page Doctor Who story had pretty much passed by. And so thankfully the structure of the story worked out that there was a framing device and then sort of little flashback vignettes, and it worked out very nicely for me to draw the framing scenes and have another artist draw the vignettes, but it meant that I wasn't going to get to draw some of these cool monsters that were showing up in the vignettes. But then I got to do this cover, and so I felt much better about it. That's the print version of the cover, and there's the console rooms again, so that other slide was extra. I apologize for that. Story inside. The 10th Doctor and Martha visit this alien fair, outdoor carnival thing. Interesting, like how you make it feel like a fair or carnival, but also feel alien. Lots of tents, lots of families and couples wandering around. They just happen to be alien families and couples. And then there are these mysterious children that end up looking slightly demonic and disappear with Martha. And it turns out to be the villains of our story, creatures called the Pyromeths, which I got to design, and now I want to see them in live action in the worst way. They are creatures that helped introduce fire to many civilizations because they consume fiction. And what do people do when they have a campfire? They sit around and tell stories. That's a lovely idea, isn't it? Dan Slott is such a great writer. And the idea of these creatures is they were supposed to be kind of creatures of fire and smoke. I was trying to make their bodies look a little bit like etched cave drawings to make them feel a little primeval in that way. And then just these floating faces because they're supposed to just be the stuff of nightmares. So that was a lot of fun to draw. Again, that book is like the other two books I have. I've got my signings here. The one final image I have in my presentation here to to end on, and then we can maybe do like a question or two before they kick me out. I have done one more cover yet that has not come out yet and hasn't been released anywhere yet. It's for Titan's first comic with the 15th Doctor, which will be coming out on Free Comic Book Day this year, and it's going to feature the Cybermen. So that was a lot of fun to do. So anyway, that brings us up to present with my history doing Doctor Who art. Were there any questions anybody had before they kicked me out of the room? Or have I just exhausted you all beyond the point for rational thought? Oh, I saw that hand first. Go ahead.
Why did you put Joe Grant in a uniform?
The script requested it. I don't know what Paul's reasoning was for why he wanted that, but it was scripted that way, so you'd have to ask Paul. Yeah.
How many different eras of Cybermen are in that last photo?
At least 6 or 7. They gave me remarkably little to no pushback on which variants I used. They just said it was a story that's supposed to be just kind of nightmarish and Cybermen from all different eras. So I very much went by what my favorite Cybermen designs were. Yeah, there's I think there's 6 or 7 there. I'm kind of an old school Cybermen guy, so like there is representation of the modern series. I mean, at least 2 or 3 designs for the modern series are in there, but we absolutely get Tomb of the Cybermen, Revenge of the Cybermen. We get the original Mondasian Cybermen. We get a big Earthshock Cyberman head because those helmets are the best. But yeah, there's quite a few. Any other? Yeah. That is totally depending on Dan Slott's schedule. I thought we were going to be working on the second one by now. We have not started yet. I mean, he started writing it. I haven't started drawing anything yet. The issue is that because of his deal with Marvel, any Marvel commitments come first. So, Doctor Who plans kind of get pushed back as needed to honor his Marvel commitments, which I totally understand. But I'm eager to get going because I know what the plot of the next one is, and it's really good. Any other questions before? We've got like 3 minutes, I see. Anything? All right, then I will just end with a plug. Immediately after this, I will be set up across the hall doing a signing. I have not all the prints we saw in this, but I've got a number of them here with me. Any I don't have here with me, I do have an Etsy store that you can find through my website. I do have the 3 comic book miniseries that I've done, collected editions available here. And if you just have more questions or want to chat, I love talking to folks. Please don't be scared to come up and say hi, whether it's at my signing or you just see me around the hotel during the weekend. I'm here through Sunday. I'm a local Minnesota boy. I love this con. I love Doctor Who fans. So please come say hi. So that is it for me. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your con.